Okay, so I'm gonna give each book maybe 20 seconds, gonna just rate them, uh, and then move on, because I don't want this to be too long. Okay, so first book is gonna be Heliconia, Brian Aldiss. It has to go up here. It's actually one of the greatest testaments to the seasons, I think, ever, possibly on par with Vivaldi's, the Four Seasons. It's just, it's phenomenal. It feels so big that when you get into it and you start realizing what all this is actually trying to communicate, it's phenomenal. Um, it's basically, there's this world that experiences seasons that are kind of 600, 700 years long, and has two suns, and it's basically the following of those seasons through three books, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. It did actually change my life. Okay, so next one, Animal Farm. I can't really comment on it. It's really famous, obviously. I don't think that I'd be able to give a very good review of it, but I consider it to be very well written, and obviously I think everyone should read it. Hot House is the next one. Um, this is going to be above Animal Farm. I thought it was really fun. I thought it was very, very fun. Um, the the book kept revealing kind of wondrous surprises about Aldous' world of plants. It's quite sad as well, and some of the characters go through a lot of trauma. And you know, it's not exactly a long book, but he manages to create such a fantastical world in a short space, and I think it's very impressive. It's basically about little green people and large plant spiders who take them to the moon, and on the way they experience radiation which makes them get wings so they can move around on the moon easier, and then they come back, and it's quite psychedelic actually. Okay, next book is Trainspotting. Trainspotting. Um, I don't know, if you're gonna read a book by Irvine Welsh, I think this is the one. It's quite it's very visceral. The structure of the book is not compelling. It feels bitty, and it doesn't feel like a story that's necessarily being crafted in front of your eyes. More like a story that's already been told, that is being retold in bits. But I mean, the descriptions were absolutely phenomenal. So even if it's just for that, I would recommend this. Okay, next book, Left Hand of Darkness. Um, Sadly, it has to go in If You're Bored. It was akin to Heliconia, so this Brian Aldiss book up here, I thought it was uh, quite perceptive actually. So it was written in the 60s, and it was studying gender in society, and I think she managed to do a very impressive thing, which is communicate her message sincerely and effectively, however, maybe slightly veil it in a very interesting world. The message she's trying to communicate is very relevant, I think, but it's not for everyone. Okay, Children of Time. Uh, yeah, it's going down here. It was not impressive. I think this is Adrian Tchaikovsky's first sci-fi book. Um, I I think there were a lot of tropes he used that weren't necessarily well thought out, and I think it was just dull, honestly. Which, you know, is quite sad because it looked really promising, and some parts of it were quite good. Like, I like the spiders. I think that having two different opposing viewpoints in the world at once, where you switch between them, was really interesting. But it was just boring. I thought I thought it didn't exactly hit me. Okay, next book, It. Um, this was the first Stephen King book I ever read. Um, I was unprepared, I think. the clarity with which Stephen King writes is shocking. It's actually like he was there in my head, like painting the story into my eyes, and it was really quite long, but obviously long books are better. It was it was it was beautiful. Um, I I would say that I didn't like the ending. I thought it was not exactly real enough for me. It felt a bit supernatural, which, I mean, obviously that's a big theme through the whole book. It went a bit mind warpy, which was, not pleasing, but even for the first 1,000 pages, I would absolutely recommend this book. It was phenomenal. Um, okay, next book, Unfollow. Um, I'm gonna put it at the top here. It was really quite scary, I think. Um, this is a personal account of someone whose changing ideas and life means that their family excommunicates them, and it was really scary. Can you even imagine having your whole belief system ripped out from under your feet and then having no family to support you after the fact? There was one paragraph I remember which she talked about asking herself one question about the reality of God, and she just she had this description of her stomach and how she felt at that time, and it was just I felt for her. I really did. I thought, wow, that's really something. And I think it was a well written personal account. Absolutely would recommend. Okay, next book, Everything and More. Um, if you're bored, I mean, this is a mathematical book. It's by David Foster Wallace, who, incidentally, was mentioned quite a few times in Unfollow. Um, it's about the history of mathematics and some proofs, and it's very interesting. It's very interesting, but it's absolutely not for everyone. It's non-fiction, so do with that as you will. Humble Pie. Um, sorry, Matt. I really like you. I really like Matt Parker, but this book is not quite up to scratch. I thought it was more a collection of blog posts than a book, which, no fault in that. There are many good books that have bitty stories, but it really was just a collection of what he's done. It didn't have much substance, I felt. Okay, next book, Euler, Master of Us All. Um, this was really fun. The author was quite comical at times. He talked about Euler as if he was a person who was just sitting across from you in the room, and there are a few things that the author recounted that Euler did that were just like ridiculous. Like infinity is equal to the natural log of infinity plus gamma, and things like that, which was funny. So if you're bored, go read that one. Okay. How to think about analysis. Again, it's not really a book, it's a textbook. If you're bored, it's a fairly good introduction, I thought. If you're bored, I guess go ahead. Um, okay, next book, Death and the Penguin. Um, uh, um, I would recommend, I think. It felt a bit like real life, to be honest. Not it was not fantastical at all. It felt like Kirkov was just sitting and chatting to you, which was really nice actually. Um, I, I I don't think my geopolitical knowledge is quite up to scratch. I found it hard to see what the penguin represented. I think it was an effective device either way. I felt a connection to the penguin Kirchhoff, I think, managed to paint meaningful life events in a kind of grayscale, monotone way, and that made this book feel satirical and iconoclastic in a way that was, that I haven't really experienced before. So I thought it was very good. Misery, next book. Where is it? Oh, here. Okay. Um. Uh. Mm, yeah, probably would recommend. Um. Again, Stephen King. The second book I've read from him. It felt disturbingly real. I'm not sure the main character would be able to survive what he went through, but Stephen King made it feel like he would have been able to. I thought the ending was a bit too happy. Again, maybe that's a theme with Stephen King books. If the endings get better or different in other books, but yeah, I don't know. It wasn't exactly a satisfying ending. I'll put it that way. Okay, next book, The Outsider. I feel like it's a bit of a cliche to put it up here, but I'll do it anyway. Well, no, actually, I won't. I'll put it up here. It's similar to Unfollow. It's kind of obviously The Outsider is a very famous book, originally written in French, but my French is not great. It was an insight to existentialism. It was very short, but Camus managed to get his point across very quickly, which I thought was amazing, really. Yeah, no, it didn't change my life, but I think that if it would definitely spur you on to read more into existentialism. Yeah, fascinating, and also a lovely little insight into Algeria in the past. Okay, so Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, two different books. Um, uh, Alice in Wonderland, absolutely would recommend. Thought it was really fun. Um, Everyone should read it. As first in the nonsense fiction genre, I think it was Prodigious. Okay, and the other one, yeah, not as good. Um, Sorry, Lewis. Should have stuck to maths after that first one, but well done. Anyway, that I think. Okay, next book, The Handmaid's Tale. Ooh, I think I'll talk about this before I place it. It's apparently sci-fi. It's not sci-fi. It's literary fiction. It it it's a very good book. I'll put it that way. Obviously, I can't really comment on such a classic. It manages to convey power and powerlessness in a very effective and thought-provoking way. I wouldn't necessarily read The Testaments, which is, I think, the sequel or maybe the prequel. One thing I can say is that the storyline was excellent, simply excellent. Although I didn't necessarily feel immersed in the world, Gilead felt more like a name, not really a place, or maybe this was part of a message to say that Gilead already exists and it's America. Um, anyway, uh, yeah, I think I'll put it in would recommend. This is uh, yeah, probably something like that. Okay, next book, A Wrinkle in Time. Where is it? There you go. Okay, it's a kid's book, but I thought it was really nice. It's a bit of a window into the American past. It was written in the 60s. It's not perfect, but it's short and you can imagine reading it in a few days. It's a wonderful sci-fi introduction for kids. It actually feels quite modern in a way. Um, Supposedly Madeline has introduced some overarching themes of Christianity. You know, if you view the book like that, it's obviously going to be there. But I think it's more themes of love, good versus evil, and kind of an ethereal supernatural presence. It is about kids, you know. It's not going to be too intense, but anyway, it's short and the world is built with remarkable speed. So for that reason, it's probably would recommend. Okay, next book. Okay, it ends with us. It ends with us. Obviously, it's going down here. Um, it's an orgy. I mean, I don't mean that. I'm not being facetious, right? It's just an orgy. It's it's rich people living easy lives with lots of sex and food and everything else that you can imagine that would be included in a book like this. All the characters are the same. There is one character, literally there's one character who either appears as a tall muscular man or a small curvy woman. It's an actual joke. I think, honestly, you should just read it so that you can go and have the funniest hour of your life reading through the 5-star reviews of this book on Goodreads. I'll also say one thing, right? There's a side character who appears to the main character, Lily, when she was 15. And he's a homeless boy who lives across the street, and he's 18. Anyway, they get involved with each other, right? You know, nothing too graphic happens, and then she tells him her age, and I couldn't believe it when Colleen Hoover wrote down that this homeless boy looked sad, and I quote, looked sad about the fact that she was 15 and he was 18. Like, that's disgusting. That's actually disgusting, man. Anyway, he comes back on her 16th birthday, and guess what happens? You know, I don't have to tell you. I actually just threw up in my mouth reading that. The only reason this book gets 5-star reviews is because of the people who have never read a book before discovering it. Sorry. If you liked it, I'm really sorry, but it was rubbish. Okay, next one. Never Let Me Go. Um, uh, um, ooh. Okay, I'm gonna put it at the bottom of if you're bored, but it could easily go here as well. Okay, I would use one word to describe this book, which was hazy. It felt like a marshmallow had been dropped on your head, right? Basically nothing. It was well written, that's what I'd say, but the storyline was not. It was nothing. It just felt like nothing. It wasn't. It didn't create a world for me. And I thought it was vague, fluffy, and it's not sci-fi, even though some places said it was sci-fi. So obviously I'm going to be disappointed. Okay, next book, Carmilla. Carmilla. I'm going to put it quite high on would recommend. It's it's a. I mean, obviously, it was written before Dracula, but it's vampire fiction. It's quite short. It's sweet. It's contained. I really like it. It's not quite as good as Dracula. Don't get me wrong. But as the literary mother of Dracula, I think it's really, really quite good. Apart from the fact that Le Fanu manages to craft pseudo LGBTQ plus themes into this book, and not in a positive way. As you can imagine, it's the 1870s. It's not exactly going to be positive, but they are there, which could be seen as a good or a bad thing. Um, Essentially, Carmilla and the main character have what can only be described as erotic moments together. However, the descriptions are vague, which would possibly satisfy the audience of the time. I'm not going to get into it too much, but those themes are outdated, I'll say. Okay, here we go. This is the big one. The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu. It has to go right at the top, right at the front. This is it. This is the sci-fi book of all time. It's got everything. It's actually, it's it. That's it. That's the book. If there were a book that I would recommend to anyone of sound mind, this is it. Sorry, not just the first one, all three books. This book actually nearly made me have an out-of-body experience. It's unbelievably satisfying. The ending of this book, the way Liu ties up all the holes is astonishing. Imagine a plot point in any of these other books. In comparison to a plot point in The Three Body Problem, these are like molehills to a mountain. I cannot describe how big this is. I can't describe how big it is. So obviously it's going to go right at the top there, but the only way to explain it is for you to read it. Okay, next book. The Reality Dysfunction. It's going to go there. If you're bored, read it. If you have a lot of time, read it. It's quite long. I actually didn't finish it, so I'm kind of not sure why I'm putting it on this list, but I did get 2/3 of the way through. It's really good. It's amazing, actually. But there were sex references quite often. The descriptions were wonderful, but the storyline was far too slow. Imagine getting 800 pages into a book and it's not really got anywhere. That's kind of how it felt. So I can imagine if, there's 3 books in this series actually, so imagine if you get through the first one, things might start moving a lot faster, but it just didn't have the traction, I felt. Okay, next book, Frankenstein. Ooh, obviously everyone should read it, so this is just my personal thoughts. I can't particularly comment on it, it's such a classic. 1818, when you consider that it was written 200 years ago, it becomes a lot more impressive. It did feel a bit like a window to the past, and surprisingly wide-reaching in its storyline. The main character, not only geographically, because the main characters went everywhere. I can recognise how disturbing it would have been to an audience at the time. So overall, would recommend. Obviously to everyone, but it might not be to everyone's tastes, because it's not a modern horror, so it's not exactly scary. But considering when it was written, it's a very impressive book. Okay, next book. A Brave New World. A Brave New World. I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna put it here. It didn't change my life, but it's much higher than would recommend. It was hilarious. It was the perfect length. I thought it was absolutely prophetic. Aldous Huxley managed to say what he needed to say and nothing more. I was astounded to see how relevant it was today. And I imagine the Soma pills that they have in the book as like short form content or consumerism. Yeah, I'm not sure that's particularly profound, but the way he writes about it is almost exactly the same as to what would be written about those things today. This was written in the 1930s, so nearly 100 years ago, and I struggle to see how he managed to view the future in such an effective way. I thought, yeah, no, absolutely everyone should read this, and it could change your life. Okay, Mary Beard, Woman in Power. I'll put it next to the other feminist text. I thought this was a very nice little book. This is one to carry around with you, I think, and it it's a kind of a tip of the iceberg type text, which I think manages to show you what the rest of the iceberg looks like without quite delving down to the depths. It's based on 2 essays. I like the second essay better. Um, it does honestly feel like she's talking to you, which is wonderful. I think it was very effective. Okay, next book, A Canticle for Leibowitz. Yeah, it's gonna go there. Or maybe there. Please, if you read this book, read it quickly. I think since it's based on 3 time periods, you could go for 1 time period at a time. I really wanted it to be good, but I think the message of the author was obscured too much. One thing I will say is that the jumping between time periods was done very well. It's kind of 600-year jumps each time, and you can see the world advancing, and you can see the changing beliefs. Fundamentally, I think the message was about the preservation of ideas, which is a theme in the 3-body problem as well, but not necessarily like preserving those ideas, more like discovering them and educating yourselves about them and testing them and things like that. So more of a science-y book rather than a sci-fi, if that makes sense. Okay, next book, Annie Bot. Yeah, sorry Annie Bot, you have to go down here. I really liked the book. I really liked it. I hate Doug. Doug is actually the most detestable character, and I was satisfied with the ending of this book, which I think is important. One thing I will say is that I couldn't quite tell where the story was going at times, which is not a bad thing at all. It did result in tension in the book, which was created quickly and upheld, which I think is frankly very skillful. Actually, you know what? I might move it up. Because yeah, I'll move it up to here. It has obviously a feminist message. Any book with a female's name and a robot on the front is probably going to have a feminist message. It was more back to basics. I felt the feminist message was about the female body and control and the abuse of power, which I think was communicated effectively through Doug and Annie, which were the 2 main characters. I thought it was very well done. So yeah, no, I would recommend. Okay. Dark Matter. Um, sorry, Blake Crouch. Actually, you go at the top of here. Um, this book tried so hard to be sci-fi. It was nearly there. It was nearly there, but it wasn't really. um, the language was not great. There was a lot of profanity, which I thought is fine in some books, but when you're using it as a device to make your book seem more punchy, it's not there. You know, you can't do that. I don't think that it increases the quality of your book at all. That also, I think, trivialized a lot of the characters' grief, which seemed to have little effect on them. There was no tension in the story. I knew exactly what was gonna happen, basically. So if you've read this book and didn't know what was gonna happen, I'm sorry, and I hope that you enjoy this book and ignore my review. But I I knew it was gonna be a happy ending. The ending was rushed as well. It failed miserably to create any sort of wonder for the author. It's more of a kid's book, I think. I don't know why I'm ripping it to shreds so much, so if you're a child, really sorry. But yeah. Okay, the perks of being a wallflower. Um, Reading this book was, I think, the closest I came to shedding a tear from literature this year. It it just broke my heart. I felt a lot for Charlie, the main character. He felt like a real, actual person, which Stephen managed to craft with great diligence. He doesn't know what's happening in the world yet. Charlie doesn't, and isn't trying to pretend to look like he does. And there are big themes of abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse throughout the whole book, which is harrowing. It's harrowing. That's the word I would use. I thought it had a big effect, even though it was so short. And I think it raises a really quite disturbing question, which is, do the good things we do come from bad places? Obviously, I can't answer that, but I think it was, yeah, really shocking. Absolutely would recommend. I might even move it up a bit, somewhere like that. Yeah. Okay, Blazing Fruit. The final book is a collection of poems, by Roger McGough. I read this over a course of a few days. Where should I put it? Yeah, no, I would put it quite high up here. It obviously it's poems, so it's like it's not gonna have one clear message. It's a collection. It was quite funny. I thought most of the poems were quite serious, but thinly veiled with comedy, which maybe speaks to a more satirical, cynical nature of the poems, which I think I really connect with. I don't know. I don't know how to review poems. I'm just gonna put that out there. But if you're bored, go ahead. I'll include a list of books I started this year but did not finish, and also a list of the books that I'm going to be reading next year, or at least the current list so far. Thank you very much for watching. This will probably happen next year at some point. Goodbye.